Open your Bibles to the second Psalm. That would be Psalms chapter 2. Last week we looked at, as an introduction to the Psalms, several texts in the New Testament that show us how Jesus interprets the Psalms. He claimed the Psalms for himself. He said that they testify to him. And he actually chastised those who would look to the Scriptures and hope to find life without finding him. So in John chapter 5, we read that Jesus, talking to the religious leaders of his day, said, "You search the Scriptures because in them you think you find life, but it is they that testify to me." And so he says, when you read the Bible, you should be seeing Jesus. If you see something other than Jesus and think that that's leading to life, it's not leading to life. And so then we looked at the first Psalm in light of that, and in light of a couple other texts in the New Testament, particularly Luke 24, where Jesus says that everything that was written in the Psalms must be fulfilled about him. So then in the first Psalm we saw that this righteous man, who is like a tree planted by streams of water and yields his fruit in its season, and all that he does prospers, that's Jesus. And then we also saw that the wicked man, that's like the chaff that the wind drives away, and the one that will not stand in the judgment, or will not sit in the congregation of the righteous, the man that his way will perish, we saw that that also is Jesus. That Jesus is the righteous man, and Jesus is the wicked man. Jesus, in living a perfect life for us and delighting in God's law and fulfilling God's law in our place, he is the righteous man. And in dying on the cross for his sins outside of the blessed city of Jerusalem, by virtue of his vicarious atonement, by virtue of his dying in our place, taking upon himself our sin and our judgment, he is also the wicked man. That verse is not first and foremost, and maybe only in light of what he is for us, about us. So that I want you to picture it this way. If I said we're having a family dinner this week, on Wednesday we're going to have a family dinner, and I call members of my family and I'm like, we're going to have a family dinner this Wednesday. Be at my house. And a random stranger shows up to my house and says, "I'm here for dinner." I might look at him weird. Now, of course, the hospitable side of me would say, "Well, yeah, great, come on in," because I love that and everything. That's fine. But ultimately, I would still be thinking, "Who is this guy and why is he at my house?" Right? I mean, that's natural. I can be forgiven for thinking that. And he's like, "Oh, well, yeah, I mean, I'm here for the food." Now, what happens if my brother says, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, this is my friend. Yeah, I invited him." That would change everything. "Oh, well, let me get you a root beer." I mean, it would change everything. I would be completely hospitable without thinking weird thoughts. Right? If he wasn't invited by somebody else, I would be thinking weird thoughts the whole time. I might offer him hospitality, but I'd be thinking weird thoughts. But if that simple phrase is introduced, "He's with me," I would be like, "Oh, okay, that changes everything." The only way that Psalm 1 applies to us is because we are represented by Jesus, both in his perfect righteousness and in his death for our wickedness. That's how it applies to us. Taking it apart from Jesus, aside from Jesus, outside of Jesus, it's useless to us. We have no claim to God. This is the part that we have to understand. we have no ability to obey. It's not just the will. It's not just the desire. It's the ability. Because of the curse, we have not the ability to obey God. It doesn't matter how many laws He puts upon us, we have not the ability to obey. It is no different than telling a man who has no arms to do push-ups. And if you can do 100 push-ups, you can go to heaven. It doesn't matter how beautiful the promise of heaven is, how eternal it is, how great it is, how benevolent the person that would promise such a thing is. If the guy has no arms to do the push-ups, he has no ability to get into heaven. That's not good news for him. If you just do these 100 push-ups, you can get to heaven. Isn't that good news? And preachers are going around preaching righteousness as though that's somehow good news. If you just don't walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of sinners, or sit in the seat of scoffers, and you delight in the Lord every day, and you can go to heaven. That's not good news. That's bad news. Because it's not just that I don't want to, it's that God has taken away my ability to. I have no hope of fulfilling that. Only Jesus. And so we can see that this is what it means for the Psalms to be mediated by Christ for us. That we don't just take these and just start just ripping them out and applying them to ourselves. That's not how it was meant to be read. You will not find life doing it that way. And so now, as all of that is an introduction, we will start into the second psalm and read it in a similar manner. Why do the nations rage and the peoples plot in vain? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against His anointed, saying, let us burst their bonds apart and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens laughs. The Lord holds them in derision. Then will He speak to them in His wrath and terrify them in His fury, saying, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will tell of the decree. The Lord said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron, and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Now, therefore, O kings, be wise. Be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear, and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest He be angry, and you perish in the way. For His wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in Him. This is an obvious text about Jesus. It's very clear who is the king that God the Father has set over the nations. It is King Jesus. How do we know that? Because it's actually quoted in the New Testament. You are my son, today I've begotten you. We know that Jesus is the only begotten Son of God. We know that He is the anointed Messiah, the saving King that will come and rescue His people. Not just from an enemy without, but from the enemy within. So in this text, it is a little different than the first psalm. All the psalms testify to Jesus, some more clearly than others, as we go through. But this one here, yes, there is a way that it does apply to us through Jesus, but I want to first look at it from the perspective of Jesus as the one that this psalm is written about. So in other words, I want to take it like we did Psalm 1 and say, how does this reflect Jesus? Well, first we have, like any good story, the problem, the conflict, the dilemma. What is that dilemma? The nations are raging. The peoples are plotting in vain against God. The kings of the earth, they have set themselves together against God and said, if we join together, we can break the bonds of God. We can stand against Him. That's as old as the Bible. That's as old as creation. That is what Adam and Eve did. They conspired together to break the bonds of God. They conspired with Satan to break the bonds of God. Does God not keep you from this fruit because if you eat it, you will be like him? Well, I want to be like God. They looked at it, it looked good, so they ate it. And what were their eyes open to? Good, evil. It went downhill from there. The Tower of Babel, where they joined together and thought they were going to build a tower to God. They didn't think they were going to actually build a tower to God, like they were looking up into the sky and said, I bet if we could just get through that blue haze, that God's up there somewhere. That's not what they were trying to do, building a tower. They were building a tower to show up God. They were building a tower to show. They said, look, if we don't band together and build something really massive and show our strength, we are easy prey. And so they got together and built a tower to show their collective might. It would be like NATO. It would be like the USSR. It would be like some giant alliance that has this arsenal. And you say, oh wow, that's impressive. They were building this tower to show up God. And God, of course, we know, mixed their languages, and that it just fell apart. God didn't even have to knock the tower down. All he had to do was just confuse their languages, and all the cooperation ended. And we still see that today, that no matter how hard man wants to get along, no matter how united they want the nations to be, it doesn't work. And that's part of the plan. But they've thought that they were going to burst apart the bonds of God. And that's the dilemma that God was facing. Now, notice, he who sits in the heaven laughs. He looks at this, and it's not impressive to him. This conspiracy of the entire world to stand against God doesn't shake God. That doesn't make him nervous. Well, what is God going to do at the show of force that man is able to muster? What is he going to do? Bite his nails? Is anything weird happening? Is the Trinity setting up there? Is God the Father and God the Son sitting up there, and the Father looks to the Son and says, oh, look at what they're doing. Look at what they're doing to my creation. Look at what they're doing to my rule, to my authority. What are we going to do? What do? They laugh. Like a father looking at the vain efforts of a child to stand up against him. What are you doing? That's not going to work. You ever see like an older brother and a younger brother, and the younger brother's flashing his arms and everything, and the older brother's got his hands on his head so he can't do anything, and he's just getting madder and madder because he can't do anything, and you're like, that's God in heaven laughing at the attempts of his creation to rebel against him. It means nothing. But there is a problem. It's not the rebellion that's the problem. This is the part that I think most modern preaching misses. We are so foolish and naive and just petty in our preaching, as though what's at stake in the world is good and evil. That's what we think is actually happening in the world. Like preachers are going around preaching so that people will be good, because it's a cosmic battle between good and evil. I'm looking at it and thinking, you're just childish. That's not the issue. That's not the dilemma. The dilemma is not that God is good and people are evil, and oh no, what's going to happen? Is God going to win? Is good going to prevail? That's not the issue. God is God. He's king. You can't rebel against him. Of course good's going to prevail. That's never been in doubt. That's never been in question. We actually have preachers who think, if we don't take a stand against abortion, evil is going to prevail. Do you not think that if God wanted to end all abortion right now, that he could do it? Do you not think he could do it? Is he not powerful enough? He is sitting in heaven laughing at the rebellion. Do you not think that he could stop it all right now? Do you not think he could stop all sorts of political agendas that Christians fight against, with votes and lobbying? Do you not think that God could make a perfect world right now if he wanted it?
Yeah.
Of course he could.
Amen.
Obviously he's choosing not to. Can we agree on that? Obviously he could do what we would consider fixing the world, but he chooses not to do that. Why? Have you ever considered that maybe it's not that he wants this world to be perfect? That maybe that's not even part of the plan. You have to open your mind to that possibility. That, we are not here to CTC change the culture. That's not why we're here. We have all these cute little initiatives that the church starts. Oh, we're here to change the culture. We're here to influence the culture for good. We're here to get into the things like the arts. And we're here to get into the things like economic development and justice. All these sustainable questions that the culture seems to be having. Well, who else would be equipped to lead in those areas than the church? And so we think that's our goal. The church is here to change art from Game of Thrones to Veggie Tales. And we think we've done God a favor. Like, I read the Bible and it's closer to Game of Thrones than Veggie Tales. Like, if you really wanted to get down to it, like, it seems much closer to biblical themes and biblical language and everything. If you look for it, it's there, it's really clear. But we actually think that it's our job to clean up art. It's our job to show people how to be good, quote, stewards with finances. And we think it's our job to teach people how to be better. How to make the world a better place. That's our goal. That's not the goal. God is sitting in heaven laughing. He doesn't need your help to fix the world. That's not the dilemma. In God's mind, that's not the dilemma for us. What is the dilemma? The dilemma is God wants righteous people to inherit the age to come. That's the dilemma. The dilemma is not that this world is full of unrighteous people. The dilemma is this: God is going to inhabit the age to come with righteous people, and there are none as he looks out at the pool. Amen. Like, we would all be picked last if we were on the playground. Like, oh my goodness. We are going to hand over heaven to a righteous people. And this is the pool that we're choosing from. It's not that God is biting his nails and crying because his beautiful world has been tarnished. He built this world in order to be tarnished. Before the foundation of the world, there was a group of people whose names were written in the Lamb's Book of Life. The only problem was there was no world to save. So God built a world in order to need saved. After the world was built, the only problem was all we have are Adam and Eve and they're righteous. Now what? Oh, they need to fall. Well, what are we going to do? Satan got a job for you. The same as it's always been. Satan, thinking that he's rebelling against God, gladly takes on that role. And there's the fall. And from then on, there's been this continual, not just battle between good and evil, not just battle between God's people and the world. That's how we tend to see it today. Well, there's this battle going on between God's people and the world, and the forces of darkness seem to be winning, and so we have to really work hard and pray hard and fight hard and legislate hard and all sorts of things in order to keep God on top. Nothing has changed. God still sits in heaven and laughs at the conspiracy against him. Verse 6, as for me, I have set my king on Zion, my holy hill. The king has been enthroned. The king has been crowned. There's nothing that's going to stop that. Here's the beautiful news. One of my favorite songs I got the opportunity to sing today, before the throne of God above. Before the throne. There is a throne room. And who is seated on it? My great high priest, whose name is love. As long as he is there, no one can tell me to leave. Amen. Even though I'm not dressed for the occasion. Even though I am the dinner guest who just shows up. And everybody's looking at me like, what are you doing here? Who invited you? Oh, that guy sitting on the throne invited me. Oh, I didn't know that. That's why Jesus, when he was walking the earth, gave the parable and said, when you walk into a feast, a banquet, a party, whatever, don't seek to be the prominent one there. Don't seek to be the one that's honored. Just sit in the back, keep your mouth shut, and when the host of the party sees the pitiful place that his good friend is sitting in, he's going to point him out, single him out, and say, John Doe, what are you doing back here in the back all by yourself? Come up here. Let me introduce you. Don't exalt yourself. Leave it for the host to exalt you. That is a picture of what happens in heaven. We who have nothing to exalt ourselves about, humbly and meekly enter this feast that is thrown by the king. And the king looks at us and is not ashamed of us. And he calls out to us and he says, come up here. I'm so glad you're here. Hey everybody, this is John Doe. He really sucks, but I saved him. Isn't that great? And you're not going to say, oh, well, this was all about you then, wasn't it? You're not going to be mad. You're going to celebrate it. Yes, yes. Man, I do not deserve to be here, but gosh, look at him. He's called me up here and honored me, and I mean, wow, this is, there's no words. All you can do is just celebrate in your heart at the glory that he has bestowed upon you, that you did nothing to earn. Make no mistake, Jesus is king. We are props in his play. We're not even actors, remember? We're not even actors. We're the props. We are the ones who get blessed by him. Oh, but there would not be a beautiful drama of redemption if there wasn't a backdrop that is frightening, right? I mean, I've watched a couple of shows recently, like movies and television shows, and like, you know, like all the Marvel shows that are out all over the place, and the movies that are out all over the place, and I've noticed something about every one of them that I think is going to cause problems for them in the future. All of the characters in there, like all of the main characters, they all have superhuman powers. That's a problem. Can you guys see the problem? There's a problem there. It's going to get boring after a while. You know why? They cannot lose. Like, there's nothing at stake, ever. There's nothing bad that ultimately ever happens. The only way that you can keep the drama going is to do something like show that everywhere these superhuman powers are exercised, all kinds of human misery also happens at the same time. So they got to do something to try to bring some kind of conflict into it, because it doesn't do any good to punch Iron Man. He just stands there. Like, oh, wow. I mean, how are you going to make a villain that's stronger than him? Well, if you do and you kill Iron Man, now you've got no franchise. It's over. So, what do you, I mean, it's a real dilemma here. There has to be a backdrop to make this drama interesting. This is going to sound very harsh. What if God wanted to show His glory and His mercy in saving some people from an eternity of punishment? And in order to show that glory and that mercy, that grace, there actually does have to be a place filled with people being punished. What if, in other words, what if it's not a fake salvation that we're dealing with here? What if it's an actual real salvation? What if it's not like a lot of funerals you go to where everybody is saved? Just by virtue of being born and then dying, you go to heaven. That's that. What if it's not that? What if there actually is such a place as hell? And what if it is actually a place where people deserving of punishment are being punished? And that the people that God has saved are eternally aware that that place exists? And that the people that are being punished are eternally aware that heaven exists? Then He will speak to them in His wrath and terrify them in His fury, saying, I have set my kingdom on Zion, my holy hill. In other words, though we take that as good news, because we worship that King, it is not good news for those that do not worship that King. I will tell of the decree, verse 7, the Lord said to me, You are my son, today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your heritage, and the ends of the earth your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron and dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. What if that is not figurative? What if that is literal? What if God is punishing people because of their rebellion? That He laughs at them not as a loving father would laugh at the foolishness of his children. He laughs at them as a all-powerful king who is going to mete out punishment to those who foolishly think that they could refute Him, rebel against Him. And the laugh is not a laugh of love. It's not a laugh of affection. You know, like when your kid does something that you know is bad and you're laughing about it. You know, like little toddler, and you say, don't you touch that cookie jar. And the little toddler goes over there and touches the cookie jar and looks at you and you laugh even though you realize they're disobeying you. You're like, oh, that's so cute. Look at him. He's touching the cookie jar. What if God's laughing in heaven is not an affectionate laugh like that? What if it's a laugh like, you idiot, you actually think you can rebel against me? And then your next step is hell. It doesn't sound like fun to be broken with a rod of iron and dashed in pieces like a potter's vessel. That doesn't sound affectionate to me. That sounds, well, quite bad to me. When I asked that question, what if God wanted to show His glory as king by saving some and punishing others? That, I said it might sound harsh. It does sound harsh. It sounds so harsh that you might say, I can never worship a God like that. And my only alternative would be to say to you, who are you to question the plan of God? That shows that we're part of the problem, not the solution. That shows just how badly we need that Savior. Because when the actual reality of God's plan is shown to us, rather than celebrate with God His glory, we question, who are you, God, to do that to people? How could a loving God do that? How could a loving God let all of this bad stuff happen in the world? Either, and here's how people try to get around it. They'll say one of two things. Either God is all loving and not all powerful, or He's all powerful and not loving. That's the only way that man, in his finite wisdom, can get God off the hook. And this is how most preaching is. Most people, most preachers are not going to question the love of God. They're not going to say God's not loving. I don't know any preacher that preaches that. God's not loving. I know lots of preachers that preach that God is not all powerful because they want to get God off the hook. They want to get God off the hook for things like abortion. They want to get God off the hook for things like tsunamis and hurricanes. They want to get God off the hook for hell. They actually think that they need to get God off the hook for hell. In fact, a lot of preaching that I hear today is trying to get people to actually let God have a free pass for having hell. Well, but it's not like God's sending people there. Those people are going there on their own. It's their own free will. They're doing it, and which in a way is true. Yes, nobody goes to hell that doesn't want to go there. You do choose to go there. God doesn't send anyone to hell without their knowledge. Well, I didn't even know. I mean, everybody that goes there ultimately wants to go there. And you say, well, why would anybody want to go to hell? Well, why do we do all sorts of things? Why do drug dealers take drugs that they know might have a 90% chance of killing them? Why do they do that? Because we are in love with death, because that's part of the curse. So, lots of people try to take part of the glory of God as though He's ashamed of it. As though God's wrath is a zit on His nose. As though He's looking at Himself in the mirror. And He's holding Himself up for other people to see. And you're like, oh my gosh, He is holding Himself up for other people to see. Did He not look in a mirror and realize He's got a zit on the end of His nose? Would He be that proud of Himself and say, look at my beauty? I mean, He must not know that He's got that zit there. Well, maybe we should try to powder His nose, put some makeup over it or something, try to cover it. And we got preachers trying to cover the wrath of God like a makeup artist trying to cover a zit on an actor's nose. Like, he doesn't realize it's there. Oh my gosh, the emperor has no clothes. We've got to do our part here to get him off the hook. I mean, he's looking like a real fool here. I don't read anywhere in Scripture that God is embarrassed of His nature or His plan.
Amen.
In fact, He looks at other people and says, there is something seriously wrong with you if you don't see it my way. Not my way. God says that to me. He says, Darby, there is something seriously wrong with you if you are having a hard time seeing it from my eyes. That shows how far you have fallen. And so, everything that I've said here, you could find in Romans 9. You could find it there. You could find that argument given by Paul. What if God, wanting to show His glory, prepared from all eternity vessels fit for wrath, and then also prepared from all eternity vessels fit for mercy? And He presumed that people were going to say, well, then God must not be loving if He could do that. And his only argument, Paul's only argument is, who are you? He doesn't try to reason with that. He doesn't honor it with an answer. He doesn't honor the rebellion with an answer. He has no respect for that argument, for that line of questioning. I don't know if you're like me. Sometimes I'll get frustrated with my kids because they'll ask me something and I'm like, I really should not have to explain myself about this. You ever do that? It's easy with little ones. It's harder as they get older, because as they get older, I'll be darned if they don't start coming up with good points. And you're like, mm! Like, it was so easy when they're little, because when they're little, their brains just don't quite put two and two together rightly. To do what he wants with his creation. We are his creation. That's not up for grabs. And I, as a preacher, have no responsibility to try to get God off the hook for that. That's not my job. That's not my job to make you like Jesus, to make you think he's a good guy. That's not my job. It's not my job to make you think warm and fuzzy thoughts about God. That's not my job. God will make you think whatever he wants about him. That's irrelevant to my preaching. My preaching is to show you the good news of the gospel. That's the good news, that even though God has created pots for varying uses, oh, it is such good news that he has created some for noble uses. That is good news. And the way that you know that you are created for a noble use is to continually, perpetually believe that he has brought you from an ignoble use to a noble use, from a worldly use to a heavenly use. That's all you have to do to get there, is believe that. That's it. You don't have to decorate yourself as a better pot. You don't have to get out your paintbrush and your paints and your little tools and start building beautiful stuff on the exterior to make yourself into a pretty pot. In fact, Jesus mocked that. What did he say to the Pharisees? You guys are like a cup. You're finely decorated on the outside, but inside you're filthy. Like, that's not, you're not fooling anyone with that. So, as a preacher, my job is not to give you watercolors and paintbrushes and say, okay, now make a really pretty pot. Make yourself into a really pretty pot. Here's how you do that. Here's a list of 15 ways that you can be a prettier pot this week. That's not my job. In fact, that's the opposite. My job is to help you to see the only way you can become a prettier pot, a heavenly pot, is to trust that Jesus has done that for you. That's the only way. And nothing else is required of you. That's it. Nothing else. The problem is from this week to next, you will have forgotten that. I mean, this is the funny thing, that why do you preach the gospel every single week? Because every single week you forget. From week to week. From day to day. From minute to minute. I mean, it's an amazing thing. The pot that God has made will either be dashed into pieces, and justly and rightly so, or it will be ushered into heaven. Verse 10, now therefore, O kings, be wise, be warned, O rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. What's the warning? You do not want to fall into the hands of this wrathful king. Therefore, take refuge in this wrathful king. That's the answer. You do not want to fall into the hands of the living God. We learned that in Hebrews. It's a fearful, terrible thing to fall into the hands of the living God. So the answer from the Hebrews writer is believe the gospel. The Psalm writer says the same thing. It is a fearful, terrible thing to fall into the hands of this wrathful, anointed king. That is a terrible, fearful thing. Therefore, kiss him. Rejoice with trembling.
Yeah.
That's such a beautiful phrase. Rejoice with trembling. In other words, yes, rejoice, but always knowing who you're rejoicing in. Always knowing who you're rejoicing in. He is a lion. He can rip you limb from limb.
Yeah.
Of course he's not tame,
Right.
but he's good.
Amen.
He's not a tame lion.
Amen.
You don't tame him.
Amen.
And there's so many preachers who every week think it's their duty to tame the lion.
Amen.
To show, oh no, he's quite safe. He's quite safe. You can pet him. Come on up here and pet him. Come on up here and pet him. But now, be careful, because the only way you can pet him, you have to have nothing in your hand when you pet him. So turn your hand over and show that you don't have anything in your hand. And you go up like this, very gently and softly. And don't look at him, because he might be intimidated or afraid and then want to bite your hand off. So just kind of go up meekly and don't look him in his eye. And once you get close, and let him sniff your hand. And when he sniffs your hand and sees, oh, he doesn't have like poison or a stick or anything in his hand, then you can try to turn over and pet his head. And now don't do any sudden movements or anything, because you might scare him or startle him, and then he's going to bite your head off. So just be really careful with him. But yeah, he's pretty tame if you don't scare him. Preachers do that. You know how they do it? If you're going to come close to Jesus, you've got to have clean hands. So don't commit any sins. Now, if you do, make sure that they were a while back before you would come to him and assume that you're right with him now. In other words, if you just looked at something inappropriate on the internet or something, don't then try to pray for God to give health to your wife. That's not going to happen. You've got to wait for a little while to let it boil over. Let it, approach him slowly and gently, and just be very careful. And what does the New Testament say? The New Testament says, when you have sinned, approach the throne of grace with boldness. That's the perfect time. When you have sinned, you go straight to the throne of grace. You kiss the Son and you say, what was I thinking? I did it again. Oh my gosh, I can't believe how wicked I am. And you knew it because you died for that sin. Thank you so much. I take refuge in you alone. And right now, if it is your choice to bite my head off, so be it. But here I am. I lay myself bare before you. Bite my head off if that's your will. I am rejoicing in your promise, but I am trembling right now. That should be your life every day. Not to try to live such a good life that you don't have to ever tremble. There's lots of preachers that are trying to teach you how not to tremble. This is how you don't have to be afraid of God. Wake up in the morning and first thing establish that you are His child. You pray to Him and have a quiet time. And then you go through your day, and every second you strive to do the right thing. You strive to have good, true words come out of your mouth, and you strive to have a clean heart, and you pray to Him at every meal, and you pray to Him at every turn of events, and you seek His guidance and His wisdom, and you delight in His law, and you search the Bible trying to find new rules to keep and all this, and then you keep them and you do all of this stuff. And if you do all of that, you don't have to worry. God is not disappointed in you. And then, by the way, if there's every head closed, or every eye closed, and every head bowed, if there's any of you in this room right now that don't know Jesus, come up here and pray. And every week I strive to give you a God who is worthy of trembling before. And I strive to give you the comfort of knowing that this God died for you, lived for you, rejoices in you, like He rejoices in His own Son, has prepared a place for you, and can't wait to bring you there and show you His benevolence, His goodness, His glory, His grace. But make no mistake, there will never come a day whether in this age or the age to come, when you don't tremble in God's presence. One of the greatest things that I remember when my family, we went to Niagara Falls, I don't know, years ago. One of the greatest things I remember about it is when, like, you can go down the path and you go down there where some of the falls, like it's a little side thing comes down and falls. You get down under there and that water is coming down so hard, your heart starts racing. You're like, wow, this is just a little tiny thing and it's coming down so loud and amazing that you're just like, man, if I stepped in that right now, that thing would crush me and just wash me out. Like, and that's the excitement of it. That's what brings the joy. You're like, wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, that could kill me. Ooh. I mean, that's neat. Is it any wonder that the Bible describes heaven as the sound of many rushing waters? That whenever God wants to show, what would that feel like? I didn't make myself feel that when I went down there. Just as you got closer and closer to the water rushing over and the sound of it hitting the rocks and everything, it was like your heart just started to race faster and faster. You're like, wow, that's pretty something. You didn't have to drum that up. I don't, in my preaching, try to manufacture that feeling for you. I try to preach the Bible in such a way that the Bible shows you that and gets your heart racing. We try to sing songs that will do that to you, that will lift your heart, that will show you, yes, our God is a consuming fire, but you can also be warmed by that kind of a fire. It also brings heat and light, and those are good things. So, we don't try to tame God and show He's a tame lion. He's not a tame lion. He's a lion. He'll bite your head off. And you'll bleed out all over the floor. I mean, that's gruesome. That's God. And I mean, if you think that picture is gruesome, imagine hell. Where your flesh is burning all the time but never consumed. Just can't even fathom that. You ever smell that? Burning hair? Man, I've grilled. One time I grilled, I lifted the grill up, it flared up, and burned all the hair off my arm. I was like, holy cow, I jumped back and I think my eyebrows were a little singed. And they were, Heidi shaking her head. Yeah, I thought I remembered that rightly. I was like, good Lord, I could have melted my eyeballs clean out of my sockets. Like, man. Oh, but boy, I guarantee you whatever I grilled on it that day was tasty. It was good. I mean, that fire could have likely killed me, but man, I enjoyed the dinner it made. I mean, the smell of that, you're like, oh. What is hell like? What is it like for this king to punish those who have rebelled against him? Serve the Lord with fear? I don't do that. That's a problem for me. Once again, that's not good news. Serve the Lord with fear. Rejoice with trembling? Kiss the Son, lest he be angry and you perish in the way, for his wrath is quickly kindled. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. On the one hand, we can see that and we can say, that sounds right. Yeah, if you take refuge in the Son, you'll be blessed. If you don't, you'll be cursed. What's the only thing that saved Jesus? Oh boy. Have you ever thought of this? Oh, grace. Oh boy, you fell into the trap. What's the only thing that saved Jesus? You ever thought about this? He died. He died. He died. He was punished. He was not the blessed man. He was the cursed man who turned his back on God and was judged for it. He was the man who was dashed to pieces like a potter throwing a pot against a rock because he wasn't satisfied with it. What saved Jesus? Merit saved Jesus. This is the best news for you. Jesus did not rise from the dead because God was gracious to him. Jesus rose from the dead because he was at the same time a wicked man. He was a fully righteous man. He never did anything wrong. So that he was completely at the same time simul justus et peccator, simultaneously just and sinner. The same way that Martin Luther says we are in him. We are simultaneously just, we're righteous, we're justified. And sinner at the same time, that's me. All the time I walk around with a sinful nature, yet I'm saved. I am justified by God. So was Jesus. So this text, this psalm, think about this. The wicked side of Jesus. The part of God's plan in which he died for wickedness had to be overcome and beat back by the side of God's plan where Jesus would be fully righteous. So that this psalm is so easy because it's so clearly about Jesus. It is so easy to read this psalm as though what he's saying there is, worship Jesus, obey Jesus, and you'll be saved. Don't, and you'll be killed. That's what it looks like, right? But I want you to also think of it, and probably more importantly think of it, the same way we thought of Psalm 1. Jesus is the righteous man, blessed. Jesus is also, for our sake, the wicked man who was cursed. He took our sin. Don't misunderstand me. He did not sin. He took our sin. And God saw that sin and that wickedness and punished him for it. But it wasn't his sin he died for. It was our sin. Does that make sense? So, he, in taking our sin, became our wickedness, our rebellion, and took upon himself our judgment. Does that make sense? He died on the cross not because he did anything wrong. He did nothing wrong. He died on the cross because we did something wrong. And he paid for it. Follow me. So in that light, Jesus himself in the grave needs the king that God has set on Zion, his holy hill. Jesus himself is the one who served the Lord with fear and rejoiced with trembling. Even though he himself is the Son, the righteous aspect of him is what brought him back from the dead. It wasn't that the Father had to be gracious to the Son. You follow me? The Son was righteous in himself and merited the resurrection. It wasn't that God said, okay, it's been long enough. Let's just bring him up. Let's bring him up. He suffered enough. No! Wherever it took place, there was an agreement between the Father and the Son, however it took place. But the Son obviously knew it because he predicted it. He said, I'm going to be in the belly of the earth 3 days and then I'm going to rise. So for whatever reason, the Son knew, I'm going to be in the ground, I'm going to suffer death for 3 days. He knew that. Right? So we assume that there was some kind of a discussion that took place that the Bible doesn't really talk about between the Father and the Son. Because the Son knew the plan. And then the plan came true. So obviously, he was right. He knew it. But make no mistake, Jesus did not need his Father's grace. Jesus earned his Father's love, his Father's merit. He earned that. That was his because of right, not because of mercy. And so, blessed are all who take refuge in the King. The first one to take refuge in this King was Jesus himself. Jesus himself was the first one to take refuge in his own righteousness. He is the first one that could go before God and say, I built that. I know lots of people that make fun of the idea that when a few years ago the president and some of his cabinet people, whatever, said, well, if you have some successful business, you didn't build that. That other people helped you with that. And there were lots of business owners that were like, oh, that's ridiculous. And I'm looking at it and I'm saying, you know what, I may disagree with their politics and stuff sometimes, but they're right about that. If a business owner had to protect his business with his own expenses, think about this now. What keeps thieves from running into Walmart and stealing all of their inventory? What keeps thieves from doing that? Who does that? Who keeps thieves from stealing stuff from Walmart? Who does Walmart call if a thief comes in and steals their inventory? Who do they call? Do they take you out back and shoot you? Like the manager of Walmart says, you shouldn't have done that, buddy. It's curtains for you. No, they call the police. Who pays for the police? The taxpayers. Now you could argue, well, yeah, but the Walmart pays bigger taxes than what. It doesn't matter. It's still a collective. At that point, it became collective. If they had to hire private security for every single thing that happens there, and then in order to make up for that private security's humanity had to put in constant surveillance of every single act, everything that happens, how long would it be before the whole store would be empty? How long would it be before thieves would come in, knock out the security guards, spray paint over the cameras, and steal everything? And there would be no one to call because the police aren't coming. How long would it be before Walmart would be out of business? You do that with every business. Of course every business survives at the goodwill of the people that allow it to happen. Whether that's right or wrong, that's the reality. So when somebody comes along and says, if you're a business owner, you didn't build that, they don't mean you had no say in it, you didn't work really hard, or any of that. What they mean is, without the collective, your hard work wouldn't have achieved that. You're using that as well. There's costs that other people are incurring so that you can profit. That's what they're saying. That's all they're saying. Jesus is the only one who can honestly say, I built that. No one helped me. No one did it for me. I was never the beneficiary of a collective. In fact, you couldn't even say that his disciples helped him. What did he say? All my disciples have left me. You guys, you're about to abandon me. Who did it? Who built it? God. God built it. Jesus built it. Jesus is the first one to kiss the Son. He is the first one to take refuge in himself. And he merited it. Not grace. Merit. That's so crucial. So crucial. Because if you don't believe that, you will start to think that when you go through life, God is grading on a curve. That God is just overlooking some sins. He's just overlooking some things. I mean, my gosh, he can't, nobody can keep that meticulous of books. I mean, when you've got that many transactions taking place, it gets tedious writing all that in. I mean, the business gets so big, it's easy to start, round off to the nearest tenth. I mean, round off to the nearest whole dollar. Gosh. Even the IRS rounds off to the nearest dollar. I mean, they don't want to have to sit there and have calculators that round up pennies. Like, just round it off to the nearest dollar, that's good with us. Even the IRS, if you have lumps of things that don't quite fit, just put it under business expenses, and unless you get audited, they'll take that. Okay, that's all right. All right, just business expenses. Okay, unless we really dig in, we'll take that. Anytime you see that word, it's like, yeah, we're not going to automatically audit you. We just accept there's some things that, gosh, I mean, we're human, right? God keeps meticulous track of every single thing you've ever thought, done, wanted, didn't do, didn't want, didn't think. God keeps meticulous record of all of it. He is omniscient. He knows everything all the time, present tense. Everything is perfectly accounted for. Every single thing. You actually think that God doesn't take some stuff serious? I mean, he doesn't take everything deadly serious. Oh yeah, he does. Everything deadly serious. Everything. Well, I mean, there's sometimes, surely he doesn't. Does he take a little white lie deadly serious? I promise you he does. I don't know how he does. But I promise you, everything is serious to God. Well, I mean, if your mom doesn't look pretty and you say, Mom, you look so lovely today, you think God's mad about that? I don't know if he is or isn't. I don't know. I know that whatever he is, he's deadly serious about it. I don't know what that is. I'm not going to speak for God. Maybe he thinks in that case, oh, that's such a great lie. Maybe he thinks that Mom should be strong enough mentally and emotionally that she should be able to hear. You don't look so good, Mom. I don't know what God thinks. But I know that he takes himself and his creation deadly seriously. How do I know that? Because he died. That's proof. Whatever's happening here, he takes really seriously. He died to merit my righteousness. So every day, I have nothing to hang my hat on in terms of myself. You know what? I'm going to bed tonight, and today felt like a pretty good day. I didn't look at porn one time. That's not the goal. You can't hang up your hat at the end of the day and say, I feel really good about myself today. I did not pull out in front of one person today in traffic because I was in a hurry and selfish. I didn't have that extra piece of cake tonight at dinner. I feel pretty good. I think God's pretty happy with me too. Do you see how petty all that is when you think about the Son of God dying and rising again? That extra piece of cake, that seems kind of petty. Maybe Jesus died for that extra piece of cake. Maybe he didn't have to die for that extra piece of cake because you did. What a favor you did to the Son of God. Well, I'm thankful, Lord. I mean, you should be thankful to me too because I didn't make you die for that extra piece of cake. We don't know. His thoughts are higher than mine. I have no idea what he died for me on the cross. Have you ever thought of that? I don't know what he died for me on the cross for. If he shows me that stuff, I'm sure there's going to be things on there like, that was a sin? Yeah. That was a sin that required me to stay in hell for one extra second. I mean, whatever it is. I don't know. So every day you're going through your life thinking that you and God are doing all right because you've lived a pretty clean day? No. Every day you hang your hat at the end of the night and thank the Son that he died for himself. And he rose again of his own power because he is just that meritorious. He's just that good. He is the one who delighted in the law of God because we refuse to. We are incapable of it. And because of that, we have the privilege of rejoicing with trembling at this very untamed but good lion. We have that privilege because he himself merited that for us. So, you can read Psalm 2 and say, well, if you're a king of the world, you better make sure you're bowing before the Son and kissing his ring, because if you don't, bad things are coming. Bad things are coming for you. True, if you don't kiss the Son. But the only reason that anything good can come for you is because the Son first kissed himself. That sounds really weird, but that's the reality of it. Because the Son, first and foremost, put himself first and lived a righteous life that merited what he got on the other side of the cross. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross. He knew he was righteous. He knew the future. He knew it was going to be painful, but he knew what was on the other side. Because of that, you have the ability and the right to come boldly before the throne of grace. Even right after a sin, even in the midst of a sin. What if I die in the midst of a sin? Well, do you belong to Christ? Yes, then all is well with you. It might be kind of a funny, weird sight in the middle of that sin to have to face Jesus, but you'll be safe. While in heaven he stands, no tongue can bid me thence depart. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you and praise you for the beauty of the cross, but also for the thing that we think far less about, and that is the glory of the perfect, righteous life that you lived for my behalf. Lord, thank you. Thank you for doing that which I couldn't do. Thank you for living the life that I refused to live. Thank you for dying for my sin, for my wretchedness, for my wickedness. Thank you, Lord God, that you are a God of mercy and grace and love. Lord, thank you that even though you have a place of wrath prepared for those that refuse you, there are so many that are not going to experience that because of what you have done for us. Thank you, Lord. And I pray that people would see the joy that we have in that truth. And they would want it as well. In Jesus' name, amen. Are there any questions or